let's go ahead and pray and jump right to it because we got a lot of ground to cover, and let's hit it. Lord, thank you so much just for this opportunity. Thank you for your, again, for your text and for your word and how we can walk through it. Pray, God, that this would be beneficial and instructive, and that you would be glorified overall. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, so for each chapter, I've placed, I've summarized them by little statements and quotes. So let's go ahead and talk about the some of the main observations in chapter 4, and then we'll go through each of these. So the first one we have is the response to Mordecai in chapter 4, verses 1 to 3, right? Where Mordecai finds out and then his response. Then we have the response of Hadassah or Esther in verses 4 and 5. We have Mordecai's information for Hadassah. We have Hadassah's response to Mordecai. So there's kind of a back and forth that goes on here between these texts. And then we have a time such as this. I have to talk about this for a minute. And so we'll spend some time talking about that. And then a time of fasting, which ends chapter 4, verses 15 to 17. Now, I'm actually going to read this text and then make observations. I know Will didn't address the long portions, but I find it to be for me to walk through this and to make observations about it. So let's go ahead and start chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. It says, when Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. He went as far as the king's gate, for no one was to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. In each and every province where the command and decree of the king came, there was a great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay on sackcloth and ashes. So we find that Mordecai here, when he learns about essentially the plot to annihilate the Jews, particularly in the regions, but more so directly in the direct authority of the king Xerxes. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out to the midst of the city. Why is Mordecai responding in this way? We kind of know why, because again, he finds out that his people are going to be exterminated. Because again, all the things that he learned about in the previous chapter. Again, what are the things that Mordecai learned? He learned about the lot being cast to Haman, that we hear about the smearing of the Jewish people by Haman before King Ahasuerus, the fact that he has been given this signet ring, and this signet ring gives Haman basically extensive authority. Even so far as to create his own decrees on behalf of the king. It's like a signature, right? And as we learn that once you kind of make this decree, you cannot alter it. You cannot remove it, right? The offering of 10,000 talents to exterminate this people. So it's not that he just came to Haman and said, "Hey, Haman, there's a people that has been that's been causing all this trouble. They're not going to bow to you." He goes, "Oh, well, they're not even going to bow to you, but I'll also give you money. I'll give you money to exterminate them and put them into the king's coffers." That's pretty crazy. Okay. So he learns all of this information, right? And we're talking 10,000 talents. That is millions of dollars. Okay, that's a ton of money, a ton of resources. Right. Again, we see the passing of the signet ring to Haman the Agagite, Again, this is a symbol of authority to act out on behalf of the king and make decrees and make decisions and do all these things. Essentially, when you pass on a signet ring, it's like the king's doing this himself, which is, again, rather fascinating. The written order is given in all the provinces in every language. So it's more than just one language. From every area, from Xerxes' immediate rule, from Susa, all to in that surrounding area or that region. Okay. Now, of course, his kingdom is vast and expansive, right? However, if the extermination of the Jews happens within Susa and the surrounding nations or the surrounding areas, the district towns, how long do you think it would be when word would catch on that these people need to be exterminated? It probably wouldn't take too long. Okay. So even though this decree was given to the Susa and all the kind of the neighboring cities directly, it wouldn't take very long for this act to expand out onto the other places. Of course, Israel, as mentioned, being a vassal state, there wouldn't be a lot going on there, but our surrounding areas of that place, I mean, it is game on. Okay. Not only is the order is given to exterminate the Jews, but also steal their stuff too. Okay, so we're not just talking about an extermination of a people. They get to take their possessions and make them theirs. All right. Not just murder, but also stealing, robbery. It basically makes it legal for them to do this. And as Will mentioned before, they are not to resist this. To resist this, again, is an act against the kingdom. And therefore, you get to call the troops out and get to lay waste to everyone within the surrounding region. Mordecai learns all that they had done. He tore his clothes. He puts on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. This act of tearing clothes and putting on sackcloth and ashes on the head signifies an extreme lament. We see this within the customary practice of the nation of Israel, going through deep sorrow, suffering, lamentation. Now, do you think when he was weeping that was this like a silent weeping? No, this is a loud howling, yelling, screaming, throwing dirt up in the air. I mean, he is literally distraught. Okay, as one should be. I mean, if you learn that your people are going to be exterminated, right, and spared no expense, you can't fight back. There is no, you can't defend yourself. You have to allow them to perish you. Well, of course, this would be the response. This was also done in conjunction with prayer and petitioning the Lord for certain requests, right? Which we'll talk about here in a second. In every province, in each and every province where the command and the decree of the king came, again, there was great mourning among the Jews. So Mordecai, think about this, Mordecai wasn't the only one that was doing this. You had all the Jews that were weeping loudly and wailing and mourning within the citadel of Susa, outside of the citadel of Susa, in the surrounding nation, in the surrounding district towns of Susa. And we're not just talking about older individuals. We're talking about young men, young women. Again, this response was not only done by Mordecai, but throughout the direct kingdom of Xerxes. This decree meant that all of the Jewish people in his kingdom, his immediate kingdom, would be executed. This is what we're talking about here. Susa and this surrounding area right here. And like I said, you've got the ancient road here where all the news would be sent. Hey, did you hear about what's going on in Susa? This would put all of these other areas at risk as well. This would spread all throughout the city, all throughout the kingdom. So again, even though this stuff is occurring in the immediate area in the region, this would have great impact upon the kingdom itself as a whole. Right? Let's continue on here, verse 4 of chapter 4, as the scene has been set. Then Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her, and the queen's writhed in great anguish. And she sent garments to clothe Mordecai that he might remove his sackcloth from him, but he did not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach from the king's eunuchs, whom the king had appointed to attend her, in order to go to Mordecai to learn what was this and why it was. It would seem to me that this is kind of interesting because, of course, Esther's maidens and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai and what he was doing. And, of course, the queen writhed in great anguish, not because she knew, but because she knew that Mordecai was in great anguish. She doesn't know what's going on yet. It's kind of interesting. So Esther summons again one of the king's eunuchs to go and inquire why Mordecai's acting the way he is, why he's in front of the king's gate wailing and wearing sackcloth. Obviously, she knows that he's mourning about something, but she doesn't know what about yet. Because she didn't know why Mordecai was responding this way and bringing all this attention to himself, she sends one of the king's eunuchs to inquire about this. We read in verses 6 to 8, so Hathach went out to Mordecai to the city square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasury for the destruction of the Jews. She didn't know. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict. So he's coming with receipts. Hey, this is going on. You might want to tell her this. Right? Because she's the only one right now in a position that's able to do anything about this. So he shows her the copy of the text of the edict, which had been issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show Esther and inform her, let her know this is happening. And in order for her to go in and implore his favor to plead with him for her people, Hathach came back and related Mordecai's words to Esther. I find this very fast. Esther's the queen. She should know this. And yet, she does not know that this thing had been sent out. Again, this goes to show you that it could be Haman is doing this under the nose of Xerxes, right? Because she doesn't know. Hathach investigated Mordecai's behavior. And Mordecai gives the following information: the amount of money, millions of dollars, 10,000 talents, right? Not a small amount. Promised to the empire coffers a copy of the edict of the destruction of the Jews in Susa, more than likely in the Babylonian language here. And then Mordecai pleaded to the king's servant who attended to Esther to show her the information, the king's edict and all of this. Verses 9 to 11. Hathach came back and related to Mordecai's words to Esther. Then Esther had spoke to Hathach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who goes into the inner court who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he is to be put to death unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. So usually in some renditions of Esther, usually you have Mordecai talking with Esther directly. That's not what's happening here. Mordecai, Esther would go and give a message to one of the king's servants or one of the king's officials. That king would relay the message, right? And then Mordecai, who's possibly at the king's gate at this point, would relay what he wanted to communicate to Esther, and then he would go back. This is a message between the both of them, okay? Esther communicates something interesting. She returns to Mordecai. Hathach returns to Mordecai and gave him the words Esther said to him. Basically, if she enters into the inner court and is not summoned, and this includes anyone, as I mentioned before, if he does not want her there and does not stick out his golden scepter to accept her, she will be seized and executed. Essentially, she's saying, I'm not going to stick out my neck for this. This one law, this is kind of preventing me from doing this. No, we're good. So the servant goes back and tells Mordecai this. You can imagine Mordecai's response, right? Yeah, she said that there's one law. Anyone who goes, she's going to get executed. She doesn't know about that. Mordecai, perhaps beside himself, right, says the following in verses 12 to 14. They related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told them, now there's more than one, right? There possibly was more than one before this, but now he's definitely bringing out the servants that are coming to tell him this, that Esther said this. Tell him to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. What a fascinating statement here. It's interesting that he has to even tell Hadassah, Esther this. You would think that Esther would go, you know what? Okay, it's time to get into action, right? It's time for me to think about what to do here. She said, no, I'm good. She goes, but the servants go back and tell Mordecai, and Mordecai goes, don't think you're going to escape this too. Esther orders more eunuchs to answer the Mordecai, and Mordecai responded to the following points. And he replies this, if she ignores, he says, don't imagine, don't concoct. If she ignores this request from Mordecai to save her own life, her physical life, help and protection will come for the Jews from another place. This is very fascinating here. Help and deliverance. The word deliverance in this particular section is the very same word that is used when God said that he delivered the Jews from the hand of Pharaoh. Right? That the Jews will be delivered from another place, and you and your family will be destroyed. How do you like those apples, Esther? You tell her that. Now, how can he say this with such confidence? How does he know that deliverance will rise from another place? Of course, the text does not give us any details of the information, but I would presume You think about the book of Daniel, for example, and the prophecies concerning another kingdom. You think about some of the prophecies concerning Israel and the preservation of Israel as a nation. We'll get to some of that tomorrow when I talk about the implications for Israel. But nevertheless, Mordecai has information. That information comes about by God's information that he gave to the nation of Israel concerning their preservation. It could also be possible, too, that the help and the deliverance would arise from Israel itself. Considering if you're thinking eschatologically. Either way, Mordecai is confident that if you don't do something, God will. And he will judge you for this and save us if you don't decide you want to do this. This is not a threatening thing or a manipulative thing. This is a statement of fact for Mordecai. Mordecai told her, for the sake of God's name or reputation, he will offer aid and protect Israel to display his glory. Even though God is not mentioned in this statement, it is clear what he's talking about here. And to those in the direct Babylonian Empire, additionally, God will punish Esther and her family for his name's sake. Again, this is why the question that Mordecai says to Hadassah is so important. Which question? This question. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this? I can't stand out of context passages. This is perhaps one of the most out of context passages that are used. I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. You'll talk about this tomorrow. But this context is not talking about us. This is talking about Esther and her position that she has attained to give audience to King Xerxes. Again, this question has within it the point of her being in a position of influence and to help and deliver the Jews all over the empire of Babylon, particularly the region that is found within Susa. Yes, she is the prominent wife or the principal wife of Xerxes. And yes, she has essentially been used to the delight of Xerxes. But perhaps this is why she's been put in this position in the first place, to thwart this particular plan of Haman. So we spring into action. Go assemble all the Jews, verses 15 to 17, who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did as just as Esther had commanded him. Now, again, she's not talking to him directly. She is talking to him through the servants that she sent, right? So Hadassah told all those who is communicating through all the Jews found in the citadel of Susa and the surrounding nations there, or surrounding cities, to initiate a fast. This fast is for deliverance. This is pretty prominent practice for the nation of Israel. All right. Particularly when their lives are at stake. They fast and appeal to God for the sake of their deliverance. And again, God is not mentioned here, but the customary practices of the people of Israel, that is the Jews, underscores this very clearly. because she is going to go to the inner court against the law of King Xerxes and would be risking her life in being destroyed. Now, remember, she has to go through 3 chambers, right? Outer chamber, inner chamber, and the king's throne. Okay. Now we know the end of the story, right? We got it. But put yourself in this history at this time. They don't know how this is going to turn out. Okay. Outer court, she finds out, she's done. Inner court, he sees her. He snaps his finger, she's done. Right? That ends chapter 4, verses 15 to 17. Now we come to chapter 5. And we have our titles here and the corresponding verses that are associated. So Hadassah, that is Esther, enters the inner court. That is chapter 5, verses 1 to 4. A banquet fit for a king is chapters 5, verses 5 to 8. Haman drinks the copium. Yeah. Verses 9 to 13 of chapter 5. And hang 'em high. Verses 14. All right. Let's look at some main observations found in chapter 5, verses 1 to 4. Now it came about on the 3rd day after the fast that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's room. That's a cool thing because that means that she got from the outer court to the inner court. She is standing in front of the throne room. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room opposite to the entrance of the palace. Again, we talked about that huge ramp that she has to go. She has to walk up, right, with the elevated platform. Okay. Her life is still in danger here. Okay. She got past the first room, but she's still there. Okay. Again, Hadassah fasted along with the Jews within the surrounding region, had interceded for 3 days, and went into the inner court against the law of the citadel. She's breaking the law here in Susa. And the king was sitting on his throne in the throne room and sees her from the inner courtyard there. Again, this is a long way from there. Okay. Maybe he's able to make out who she is, maybe not, but he certainly sees her there. Okay. He says, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. So he was happy to see her. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. That is a right. If that scepter was held back, she would have been seized and taken away and executed, not back into the harem. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter, basically signaling that she accepts his invitation. Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther? And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be given to you." And Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." So King Xerxes accepts or Hadassah into his presence by extending the golden scepter. She comes near, again, walking up that long ramp up to the elevated platform, touches his scepter, and she is able to petition to him. Now, she, instead of her basically spilling the beans with Haman, she doesn't come out right away and say, Haman's going to try to kill us, right? Instead, she offers a banquet for them that day. Okay, so we're not waiting a week here. We're gonna, I would like to have a banquet for you and Haman today, right? Again, this was more likely a banquet that was prepared for Esther and the part of Bashan, her maidens, those elite maidens that work with her. They're probably good associates with her. They love her. They value her. They have favor for her. And so she commissions basically her maidens to make this banquet for Haman and for Xerxes. Verses 5 and 8. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires. Hey, you want to honor us? That's cool. I'm down with that. You know what I'm saying? I like this. I like a little politics, right? But I also like to eat. And you doing this, you hooking me up. You got Haman too? Come on, bring the food. So the king and Haman come to the banquet, which Esther had prepared with her maidens. As they drank the wine at the banquet, the king says to Esther, now, come on, Esther, you come on, you buttering me up here. Come on. What you want, right? What you want from me? What is your petition for it shall be granted to you? And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be done, right? So Esther replied, well, my petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for him, and tomorrow I will do as the king says. Another one? Another banquet? Well, we already know that Xerxes likes to party, right? He loves his partying. So Hadassah invites Xerxes, and Haman serves them food and drink. Xerxes is pleased with this situation, and he asks Esther once more, what is her request? What do you want, woman? This is too good. What do you want? Right? And so Esther, knowing that she's got the king kind of wrapped around her finger here, requests for them to come to a second banquet along with Haman, and she will make her request known. She'll make it known then. Come, have fun, relax, chill, and then I'll make the request known. Very smart, right? Now, why would she do this? She could just come in and say, Haman's trying to kill us, right? Well, I think she knows a couple of things. One, she knows Haman has the signet ring, right? Which highlights in some respects, he has more authority than she does, right? I think she also knows a little bit about Haman too, considering the fact that Mordecai has told her about this individual. I think that also too, the banquet shows that she's not out to basically destroy the kingdom or destroy Xerxes. Right? She's warming him up to show that she's not there for his calamity, but for him and this kingdom's welfare. I think that the banquet that she prepared for him, I mean, this was out of nowhere. She thought up the process, but for her to come and say, hey, I got this banquet prepared for you guys, and Haman, come and enjoy, right? Shows that he has his best interests. And to show and demonstrate her humility and truthfulness to Xerxes, that I find this to be fascinating. She's serving the man that wants to execute her and everyone else. Think about that. Would you do that? I wouldn't do that. This would speak against the testimony of Haman. If Haman were to come out and say, well, this Jew, right? She would be able, why we serve you. I serve you. I served you, Xerxes. I'm not out to destroy you. Why is he out to destroy us? We don't cause any trouble in this place. It's to underscore Haman's motivations and actions towards the Jewish people. Let's continue here. Haman drinks the copium, verses 9 to 13. Then Haman went out that day, glad and pleased of heart. I bet he was. Full stomach, full meal, some entertainment. You know what I'm saying? Got the girls there. You know, everybody's having a good time. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger. Oh, man. Oh, that Mordecai. Haman controlled himself, however, went into his house, sent his friends and his wife Zeresh, then recounted to them the glory of his riches and the number of his sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him to show him how he promoted above princes and servants of the king. Haman also said, even as to the queen, let no one but me come with the king to the banquet which she had prepared, and tomorrow I am also invited by her with the king. You know what Haman is doing? He's coping. I find this to be so funny. This guy has the signet ring and he's throwing a temper tantrum because Mordecai didn't bow to him. So to calm his anger, he begins to start to give all of his accolades. Haman left the banquet happy, full stomach, everything, being invited to eat, drink, engage in revelry, all that type. However, when he saw Mordecai, he became angry. This led to Mordecai living in Haman's head rent-free. Ain't that something? Mordecai probably wasn't even looking at him. And yet he saw him and was just so upset, filled with rage, right? So what does he do? He talks about the splendor of his riches. I have great riches. I have great riches, mad possessions. I mean, I'm talking about giving 10,000 talents to Xerxes, right? His endurance of his lineage and his family line, even the signet ring. And the king of the queen, or the queen of the king Xerxes, the most powerful man in the world, served him. Man, I'm good, but not good enough for Mordecai. I want him to bow to me. How fun. And then we see the line here, yet all of this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. It could be very possible that he's done this several times, a couple of times, and yet it just makes him more mad. Even listing his accomplishments, his self-help, does not satisfy him. Verse 14 of chapter 5. Then Zeresh, his wife, and all of his friends say to him, have the gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. Oh, you have such anxiety. This is how you fix it. You've got the signet ring. Have gallows made 50 cubits high and hang them on those gallows. Now, what are gallows in this culture? Usually when we talk about gallows, we're talking about, putting a rope around someone's neck and then hanging them from it. Is that what he's talking about here? Gallows. And here's another question. How high is 50 cubits? Right? Cubit extends from the elbow to the tip of your finger here. How high is 50 cubits in our language, in our measurements? Well, first of all, the Hebrew word for gallows is ates, okay? It occurs 330 times in the Hebrew scriptures, and it literally translates to tree, wood, timber. So, usually when you see the word gallows, it is something that is made of wood, right? Very high up. Again, this Hebrew word discusses a type of material that describes it has various actions. In the context of this, though, it is an execution device that is made of wood. Its intent is to impale someone, okay? As a matter of fact, I have some frescoes here that you might find very fascinating. This is an example of a gallows. They would take them and impale them and hang them up so that they're hanging like this, right? Nice. These gallows are not to be depicted like in medieval times or things like that. No, hanging consists of impaling a body on a sharp stick of wood and hanging them there. Okay? You got entrails falling out, gross liquids falling out, blood everywhere. I mean, this is not a pretty picture. Okay? Now, 50 cubits. What is 50 cubits? A cubit is, on average, is 1.5 feet from the tip of the elbow to the fingertips, right? So if you have 50 cubits, how much do you have? How much feet is that? That is approximately about 80 feet in the air. That is tall. This is not an execution like any other. This is an execution to set an example. That's what this is. So every time Haman looks out and sees Mordecai, he gets delighted to see Haman there, right? I also believe that this is kind of a threat, right? Considering that the Jews' life are at stake, this is what happens when you don't bow to me, that type of deal. I'll just hang you high with Mordecai. Hang him high with Mordecai. That's the statement. Again, this is a foreshadowing, I believe, of the Jews living in Susa, that you're going to be executed. Chapter 6. Here are the topics here. King Ahasuerus forgets. That's interesting. Verses 1-3. A comedic situation with Haman. And by the way, the play doles this up real nicely too. They play this one really good. An ironic situation for Mordecai, or with Mordecai, verses 10-12, and an interesting statement from Zeresh. Zeresh is the wife of Mordecai, verses 13-14. Let's talk about chapter 6, verses 1-3. During the night, the king could not sleep. So he gave an order to bring the book of records, the chronicles, that they were read before the king. It was found written that what Mordecai had reported concerning Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. The king said, "What honor and dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Nothing has been done." What? King Ahasuerus can't sleep, so to calm himself, the first ASMR here, he brings out the chronicles, has it read to him. He has an attendant, reads it. That is the activities and exploits of the king. That's what was written in the book of Chronicles here in Babylon. He listened that Mordecai stopped an assassination plot of Xerxes. Now, my mind kind of scratches thinking about this. If someone foiled an assassination plot on your life, you would never forget this person, right? I mean, you would always, basically come and live with me, right? How could Xerxes forget something like this? Aren't you the king, boy? How could you forget something like this? That's crazy, right? It could be because remember, the officials are the kings. They work for the king. They are supposed to protect the king, the officials that work under his rule. And yet he finds that there are two officials that work very closely with him that are plotting his demise. That's not good. Personally, I wouldn't take that level of disrespect either. A possible reason is that Xerxes was so angry, because it says he was furious, that two of the king's eunuchs, trustworthy confidants of the king, had sought to kill him. He got so angry that he forgot to honor Mordecai in all this. Well, this will work to his advantage, but the point is he totally forgot. Well, now he's not going to forget. He's going to remember this. Verses 5-9. So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court into the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai. So remember that second chamber he was in. Of course, he's been given the permission to go into the inner court. Okay. And it's just received word that Haman is there, and he's getting ready to talk to him about hanging Mordecai 80 feet in the air, right? The king's servant said to him, "Behold, Haman is standing in the court." So the king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in and the king said to him, "I have a question. What is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor?" Now, who do you think Haman thinks he's talking about? Himself, right? "I've got the signet ring, baby. I'm getting ready to get my comeuppance, baby. Yeah." So Haman said to the king, "For the man whom the king desires to honor, let him bring the royal robe which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and whose head a royal crown has been placed, and let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princes. And let them array the man whom the king desires to honor him, lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim to him, 'Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor.'" Now, do you suppose that Haman is thinking that he's going to get a bow from Mordecai in this way? Oh, man. So King Ahasuerus, that is Xerxes, asks him a question. And Haman says this to himself. He's curious about who Xerxes desires to honor. Who does Xerxes desire to honor? Maybe perhaps me? I mean, I'm the only one that's got the signet ring, baby. You know what I'm saying? I mean, who else is he talking about? Haman suggests that he be honored by being a king for a day. I already got the ring. Let's get the crown on. Let's get the royal robes. Let me get the king's horse. Let me trot along the city of Susa and be recognized by everybody. And I'll get that Mordecai to bow to me then, right? Then the king said to Haman, "Then that's a good idea. I'm glad you thought of it. Take quickly the robe and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew." Oh, you want to see Haman hot? He's piping hot now. Are you kidding me? Wait, can you repeat that? Who's sitting at the king's gate? Do not fall short in anything of all that you said. You came up with the idea. It's a great idea. Do it for Mordecai. He's awesome, isn't he? So Haman, I'm sure, very, very happy that he's doing this. Took the horse and the robe. Now think about this too. Haman has to put this on him. He has to put it on him. He has to bow and have him come up on the horse itself. Oh, this is so good. He arrayed Mordecai. He led him on horseback through the city square. He has to lead him and proclaim. He has to shout with his own voice, "Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor." Then Mordecai returns to the king's gate, which is in where the city is. So all of these individuals, all these Persians, all these Jews are observing Mordecai being honored by Haman. What a scene. But Haman hurried home with his head covered. Oh, he has to go do more copium sessions. If I had a chance to do this particular play, I would have Haman on the couch like Sigmund Freud and having him, I just don't understand what I'm doing wrong. Right. Oh, tell me more. Mordecai did not bow down to Haman, but Haman had to acknowledge Mordecai. Ain't that something? Mordecai shamed Haman in public for not bowing to him, and yet Mordecai was honored. He shamed him in public. And now Mordecai is honored in public by the same man that he shamed in public. Haman's intent was to talk about hanging Mordecai as a public display of disgrace and vengeance at the hands of the king. However, the king has honored him throughout the citadel. You know, it's kind of fascinating. Xerxes' aloofness is working out in the favor of everything here, right? I mean, Xerxes ain't pulling no strings. I mean, he's not behind any of this. I mean, it's amazing that he even knows his own name. Additionally, this honor of Mordecai came during the time that Haman wrote out an edict to annihilate the Jewish people. What an amazing thing. Verses 13 to 14. This is interesting here. Haman recounted to Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends that had happened to him. There's no copium now. He's beside himself. These wise men and Zeresh then said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you won't overcome him. You will surely fall before him. What a statement. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet where Esther had prepared. This is kind of interesting because I used to do theater back in the day, and usually when you got to the last act of a particular play or scene, right? It's all foreshadowing, right? There's usually a statement written by the person who does the playwright, right? And before you get to the climax, there's always the trajectory, and that trajectory usually starts with a statement. This, I believe, is the statement. It is very fascinating that Zeresh says this to Mordecai, to Haman about Mordecai. You have begun to fall. Haman, after the recognition of Mordecai throughout the city, he returns and basically cries to his wife and his friends. He's upset, he's angry. And again, recall his wife Zeresh and his friends counseled him to create a steak. These are the same people that told him to make a steak. Not one you cook in a pan. I mean, a steak, the gallows, to hang them high, right? And now they're telling him, you're not going to win this. I think you need to chill, right? If Mordecai, whom you've begun to fall, is of Jewish seed, that's the literal word, is of Jewish seed, Zeresh and his friends recognize that Mordecai is of Jewish descent and observes that what just happened is the beginning of his cast down. You leading him with a horse all around the city, this is the start of your fall. This is it. Now, how would Zeresh and Haman's friends know this? Well, there's several possibilities. One, again, they live in Babylon, right? And so they have possibly have heard, again, the things of Daniel. Again, Daniel was very prominent here. We also have the history of the Amalekites to Israel, too, which is Haman's descendants. It is possible that they heard the history of the God of Israel. This is what makes them ancient enemies to begin with. And every time they got defeated by the Amalekites got defeated by Israel. David in 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 through 18, and Simeon in Chronicles talks about the destruction of the Amalekites by the hand of God through David and Simeon. Again, David defeated the Amalekites, who, by the way, was from the tribe of Judah. Okay. So Zeresh has some information. And she's basically saying, you're done. Matter of fact, you will not overcome him, but you will surely fall before him. And I believe that Zeresh and his friends are speaking in the prophetic words from that great documentary, Rocky IV. You can't win. You see him, you know how strong he is, right? You can't win. Verse 14 of chapter 6 here. Now, while they were still talking with him, again, which is so fascinating, they told him this. While they were still having the discussion about the start of his fall and all of the circumstances that surround this, the king's eunuchs arrive and brought Haman to the banquet that Esther prepared. That is banquet 2. Oh boy. Haman's wife and friends still discussing the situation. He's still furious. Zeresh is still warning him. His friends are going, do you know what this means? You are going to lose. As he's of Jewish seed, you're done. And right when they are discussing this outcome, the king's eunuchs, by way of Esther, come and summon Haman to the second banquet that Esther has prepared for him. Man, this is when things really get interesting. Onward to chapters 7 and 10. Let's pray. There's lots of intrigue. I know that we have read this book and we've done so without stopping to think about all of the tension that is surrounding and even some of the comedy that's surrounding this, the irony of some of these statements that are found within Esther. Again, it's just amazing how all of these things are being played out as we're reading them. Again, may we continue to be mindful of these events as they unfold before us, looking at them from new approaches and different perspectives and trying to grasp basically the clarity of your text in this. Thank you again so much. For it's in your son's name. Amen.